I'm Kayla and I'll be turning 55 soon. I have a son named Nick, and I divorced my husband when Nick was in middle school. The reason was my husband's infidelity. Since then, it's just been Nick and I, but now he's married and I live with him and his wife. My daughter-in-law, Nora, is a very beautiful woman. Initially, I had a very good impression of her, but after living together, her true colors showed. She stays at home as a homemaker, but she doesn't do anything that resembles homemaking. She leaves everything to me, and if I ever ask for help, she turns vicious, which is hard to imagine, given her pretty face, and I've often been on the receiving end of her abuse. I wouldn't mind as much if I were just a homemaker, but since I work, there are days when I'm so tired that I wish for help. Nick has seen the way things are between his wife and I. He's asked her to help around the house, but after being verbally abused just like me, he gave up. Seeing all this, I resigned myself to endure without saying anything, but then one day, everything changed. Kayla. As the summer passed and the weather began to cool, I had a day off from work and was at home when I heard Nora's voice calling me. Usually it sounded sarcastic, but that day it seemed frail. Wondering what it was, I stopped my chores and peeked into the couple's bedroom. There I saw Nora, pale-faced and about to fall off the bed. What's wrong? I rushed to Nora, touching her hand to check on her. Her hand was chillingly cold, with a pulse that felt slightly fast. She didn't seem to be in a healthy state. Thinking it might be a cold, I touched her forehead, but it wasn't hot. Are you okay? What's wrong? I leaned over her listless body and asked. In a faint voice, she barely replied. My stomach hurts so bad, she said, rubbing her lower abdomen. I thought it might be severe menstrual pain, but when I asked if she had any other symptoms, she mentioned that she had been experiencing diarrhea for a few days, sometimes with blood. I wondered if it could be hemorrhoids, but it seemed unlikely that just hemorrhoids would cause such a severe condition. I decided to take her to urgent care despite the uncertainty. Urgent care seems excessive. Water will be fine. I told her that we needed to go to the urgent care immediately, and although she looked annoyed, her voice still sounded in pain. I was frustrated with her reluctance, but I forced her into the car and drove to urgent care. I informed Nick, telling him we were at the urgent care clinic, and he said he would come by after work, so we waited for him. The waiting room was full of people, and it looked like it would be a while before Nora's turn came. Nora chose an empty spot on the long bench and just lay down as if all strength had left her. She must be feeling pretty awful to find it hard to even stay awake. Worried, I kept an eye on Nora while waiting for our turn. How long had we been here? After about 2 or 3 hours, we were finally called into the examination room. It was a struggle, but I managed to help the barely rising Nora to enter with me. That's where the conversation and a series of tests began. We'd arrived at the clinic sometime after 2 p.m., but by the time all the tests were done, I think it was past 5 p.m. Not only was Nora worn out from being tossed around for tests, but I was also beat from just being there with her. It's exhausting, whether it's an urgent care clinic or not. I sat down next to the exhausted Nora and let out a heavy sigh. Then her name was called. I got Nora up again, and we entered the indicated examination room, locking eyes with the doctor inside. The doctor wore a grave look and said we needed more detailed tests, and then Nora had to be admitted immediately at the hospital. I knew this would happen. Afterwards, a nurse led us to the room Nora would be staying in and handed me a paper with a list of things she'd need. Dr. Miller, I know you will understand, so I'll skip the explanation, the nurse said with a smile outside the room. I scratched my head and looked at the nurse. I'm a family member of the patient, you know. How about giving me a little rundown? I said with a forced smile. The nurse sighed heavily. Dr. Miller, you know how busy we are, right? Please. With that, the nurse headed towards Nora. The reason the nurse spoke to me that way was because I'm an internist here. I've been around since my residency, almost 30 years now. Everyone, nurses and doctors alike, knows me here. But Nora doesn't know I'm a doctor. Nick thought it best to keep it under wraps. He said if people found out I was a doctor, they'd start hounding me for money. Nick, who's also a doctor, says we're not short on money, but he thinks I'm underestimating Nora. I didn't understand what he meant by that at the time, but looking at Nora now, it's clear. She does nothing, even though she's a homemaker and controls all the money Nick earns, doing as she pleases with it. When she's well, she goes shopping and comes back holding shopping bags from fancy brands, which is a bit off-putting to see. I've asked the hospital not to mention that I'm one of their doctors, so Nora won't find out. For now, I've left everything to the nurses and decided to go home to get Nora's things for the hospital stay. As I was grabbing items like clothes, a toothbrush, and a cup, Nick came back. Looking at the clock, it was already 7 p.m. "I'm home," he said. "Oh, didn't you stop by the hospital?" I asked, thinking he wouldn't be home this early if he had. Nick let out a heavy sigh and put his bag down onto the dining table. "I called as I was heading there, but she told me there's nothing I can do. Instead, she told me to go buy sweets, and while I'm at it, pick up her things from the house." He recounted with a wry smile. Nick was exhausted deep down, no doubt about it. "Well, I've just finished getting ready, so I'll bring it over," I said, mirroring Nick's wry smile. With that, we set off again for the hospital, where Nora was admitted. Upon reaching the hospital and entering Nora's room, the sight of her connected to an IV and fast asleep from exhaustion greeted us. She's truly lovely when she's peaceful, I thought, though I could never tell her that. Nick quietly arranged her things without waking Nora, then sat down on a chair. "What could it be?" he muttered under his breath. Watching him, I felt his concern. I tilted my head. "From what I've heard, it's hard to say. Let's just wait for the results of tomorrow's colonoscopy and blood tests." Nick nodded in agreement, and we headed home. The next day, I had work, thinking I'd check on other patients while waiting for Nora's diagnosis. At work, another doctor stopped me to discuss Nora's condition. The diagnosis was Crohn's disease. It's an intractable disease with an unclear cause, yet it's also a condition that many people suffer from. It seemed that Nora's condition had worsened, putting her in a serious state. I was frustrated with myself as a doctor for not realizing it sooner. The presence of a tumor also raised the possibility of colon cancer, and we might need to plan surgery. For now, I had to leave it to the other doctor to explain the situation to Nora. After finishing my shift and changing, I couldn't shake my concern for Nora, so I headed to her room, out of my white coat. Inside, I found Nora's mother, Victoria, talking to her. "You'll be fine. This is a big hospital, and the doctor also said you'll be okay." She seemed to be encouraging Nora. I waited for a pause before entering the room. "Nora, how are you feeling?" Victoria noticed me enter and turned my way, her face swiftly turning into a scowl. I was taken aback and stopped in my tracks. "You, living under the same roof and not noticing my daughter's condition? Nick's a doctor, isn't he? You've both been so useless." She lashed out. Her words struck a nerve, but I found myself speechless. Her face turned beet red with her breaths heavy, seeming on the verge of jumping at me. "Seriously, the least you could do, since you hardly work, is quit your job and devote yourself to Nora." When Victoria noticed my silence, she raised her voice again. "Even if you don't know about my job, nobody has the right to say such things," I thought, feeling a bit offended. But I realized that arguing wouldn't solve anything, especially not in front of a sick person. I simply apologized to Victoria and turned my attention to Nora. Nora seemed to be in a better condition than yesterday. At least her complexion was not poor. However, she looked at me with displeasure. "You seem much better than yesterday," I said with a smile as I approached her, but Nora turned her face away. Ugh, seeing your face, Kayla, is making me feel sick. Yeah, nobody likes a meager older lady around. Let's send her home. It was clear they didn't care for me at all. Victoria, trying to soothe Nora, who looked ready to curse me out, made me stop approaching any further. I'm sorry, then. I'll be leaving now. With those words, I left the room quickly and closed the door behind me. Feeling a bit upset myself, I headed home. Nick arrived soon after, having visited Nora, and it seemed he had learned of her Crohn's disease. He lamented not noticing earlier, sharing the same sentiments as me. There's nothing we can do about it now. Let's focus on treatment and support her as much as we can, I said to Nick, trying to lift his spirits. He nodded quietly. Yeah, though he seemed unconvinced. Nora began treatment that day, but for some reason, she didn't agree to surgery, opting for medication instead. The doctor mentioned the tumor was rather large and recommended immediate surgery, but she was adamant about not undergoing the procedure. So they turned to me for persuasion, but someone who seldom heeds my advice is unlikely to start now. Despite my hesitation, I've decided to visit Nora again after work. Nora, may I come in? I knocked on the hospital room door and called out to Nora, but there was no answer. After waiting a few seconds, I opened the door slowly and saw Nora watching TV. How are you feeling? I sat down in the chair next to her and asked. Nora didn't look at me or say a word, just kept watching the TV. Wondering what to do next, I continued the conversation. I spoke with your doctor earlier. They say you're refusing surgery? They seem to think it's urgent. Is there a reason you don't want it? It's none of your business. I expected such a response. I could back down, but as a doctor, and as Nick's mother, I couldn't. Don't say that, let's just talk about it. Nora sighed heavily and turned off the TV. She didn't look at me, but stared outside instead. They said it would cost over $30,000, including the hospital stay. So I just thought it was impossible. $30,000? I blurted out in surprise. It's a waste, right? She chuckled through her nose and pulled the blanket over her, but I wondered if she was regretting her words. She certainly seemed to need this. Pondering what to do, an idea struck me. I'll pay for it. That would be all right, wouldn't it? At that, her wide eyes opened even wider to look at me. You can afford that with your non-paying job? It's fine, I have savings, enough to cover this. You're not going to ask for it back later? I won't, so please go ahead with the surgery. I realized I must not have her trust, but this was no time to dwell on that. I just hoped she would accept the offer sincerely. After some thought, she gave a small nod. I smiled, left the hospital room, and informed the attending doctor. I also felt I should tell Nick, so when I got home I did, and his expression turned to one of mild distress. I'm so sorry, I should be paying, but this really helps. Do you not have savings? Understanding he was still young, it was surprising that a doctor of a few years had no savings. When I pressed, his expression grew even more troubled. All the money went to Nora, even the savings. I really don't know what to do now. Watching him bury his head in his arms on the table, I felt sorry for him. You should take charge of the finances. I want to, but she gets angry when I suggest it. According to Nick, she was so modest while they were dating, never fixated on money. But after getting married, she became a different person, quick to anger, throwing fits over trivial matters, and not shying away from spending money. Nick regretted tying the knot, but seemed unable to make the leap to divorce. Maybe he's too kind, thinking that if he just endures, Nora wouldn't have to be unhappy. Then, with Nora's diagnosis of a serious illness, it only made it harder for Nick to consider leaving. Certainly, if he were to propose divorce to a seriously ill Nora now, he'd be met with cold stares. I just told Nick that for now, he should focus on helping Nora get a bit better, and we'd think about the rest later. A few days went by, and on a day when Nick and I both had off, we went to see Nora. Entering the hospital room, Victoria was there too. "Hello." As I walked in with Nick, Victoria's glare hardened, but having grown somewhat immune to that look, I approached Nora without faltering. Nick, apparently not used to it, stopped in his tracks and didn't come closer. "How are you feeling?" I looked at Nora, whose complexion seemed a bit off, maybe not feeling well. "I don't know." Her response to my words might be a small sign of progress. I smiled at Nora's words and pulled out a check from my bag. I had put it in an envelope. "Here, this is what I promised you before." As I handed it to her, Nora's eyes lit up. She grabbed it and immediately checked inside. She looked pleased, as if she'd been waiting for it. From the outside, you'd think she loved money, which left me with a wry smile. "What's this?" Victoria, unaware of the money situation, widened her eyes at the check in Nora's hands, then shot a sharper than usual glare my way. "What is this?" "This is for the treatment expenses. Nora was worried about the costs," I replied, wondering if I should have gotten Victoria's permission beforehand, to which she narrowed her eyes and scoffed. "Playing the savior? Don't get ahead of yourself." With that, she snatched the check from Nora's hand and pushed it back at me. Nora whispered a small, "Ah," but quickly looked down when Victoria glared at her. "I didn't mean it that way. I just heard that it would be better to have the surgery as soon as possible." "There's no need. This child is strong and can make do with just medication." "The doctor in charge didn't say that." I wonder why Victoria is so against surgery. It's as if she can't entertain the thought. I look over to Nick, keeping my distance, but he shrugs, seemingly clueless. "Nora says she's fine with it." Turning away, Victoria speaks, and I shift my gaze to Nora. Then Nora looks away uncomfortably. "That's right. I don't need any surgery. Just leave me alone." Despite her agreeing to the surgery earlier, I feel incredibly disappointed. "But what if you have cancer?" "Can you just shut up? I don't want to hear an outsider's opinion." Nick tries to speak up to persuade her, but Victoria cuts him off. "We don't plan to listen to you, so could you please go away?" "Yeah, just go away." As I run out of things to say, Victoria pulls my arm, urging me outside. Nora joins in with a laugh. Nick looks puzzled and troubled. "Please, wait. Mom has gone through such lengths." "Quiet. I married a doctor and ended up with such a quack. You don't earn much, and you're totally useless." At that, Nick's expression changes. Clearly, he's angry. It's bad when Nick, who rarely gets angry, is provoked. I grab Nick's shoulder and shake my head to calm him down. Nick looks at me, biting his lip, barely containing his anger. "Nora, are you really okay with this?" Deciding they won't listen to anything more, I turn to Nora one last time. Nora frowns, but then looks at me with a forced laugh. "I'm fine. Now please take that quack and leave." At her signal, I take Nick's hand and leave the room. Opening the door, a nurse stands there, her face awkward. "That's the situation, so please pass it on to the attending doctor. I don't care anymore. Let her do as she pleases." I tell the frozen nurse, who can only nod slightly. Then I urge Nick to go home, and after that, I head to the director's office to convey something before returning home. Back home, Nick sits at the dining table, not moving, his face full of frustration. Why not just divorce? There's no need to stay after being told off like that. Nora's words had struck a chord with me, too. I'm a doctor, but before that, I'm Nick's mother. I can't stay silent after being disparaged by Nora and Victoria, but still. Yet he seems undecided, his hand on the table gripping tightly, trembling slightly. "It's your decision, but I'm done living with that girl. You can have this house, I'll move out." Upon hearing this, Nick, who had been looking down, looks up in surprise. "What are you talking about? This is your house." "It's fine. I just resigned, too. I'll find a calmer place to work." Indeed, the reason I went to the director's office earlier was to submit my resignation request. I had been waiting for the right moment to leave my current hospital for some time. Having worked there for many years in a general hospital setting, it had become too much for me to keep up. So I thought about continuing my practice in a more settled place, but the opportunity had been elusive, making this the perfect time.
Wait a second, you can't just decide that so easily.
It must have been sudden for Nick. I smiled at Nick, who looked anxious. It's something I've thought about for a long time. It's okay. It's the right moment. At that, Nick seemed to be at a loss for words, looking down again. Without saying anything more to Nick, I went into my room, checked online for a property in the area that I thought was good, and started preparing. Months later, as I told Nick, I moved away from the place I had lived before, relocating to a much more rural area. I managed to fit in with the community and am working as a doctor in a small hospital. And now Nick lives with me. He had divorced Nora, sold his house, and moved down here. From what I heard, Nick spent some time with Nora trying to convince her to get treatment, but whether it was because of Victoria or not, she never had the surgery, and her condition just worsened. But she still had the energy to berate Nick, and seeing that she never changed, Nick grew tired of it, especially when Victoria started demanding alimony, blaming him for Nora's condition, calling him a quack. Those words led Nick to decide to leave Nora. He offered alimony in exchange for a divorce, and although Victoria was against it, Nora agreed, and they divorced rather swiftly. Later, Nick heard that Nora's condition was indeed a malignant tumor, progressing rapidly due to her youth, advancing to the terminal stage. Victoria begged the doctor to do something, but was told it was hopeless and that she won't live much longer, which she tearfully relayed to Nick over the phone. Nora also reached out to Nick for help, but since she had refused it when it mattered, he did not respond. It may seem heartless, but this was a consequence of their own making. Nick was down for a while, wondering if it was his fault, but as time passed, he found peace and is now working diligently at a new hospital. I sometimes think of Nora, but now there is nothing I can do. I just hope she can spend what time she has left in happiness.
We're able to live because of the hard work of our farmers. I insist to my soon-to-be father-in-law, but my words fall on deaf ears. He mocks farming as a job that's not profitable. He even laughs, challenging me to show him the life of a farmer. Fine, let him see my family farm. He'll regret his words soon enough. My name is Henry. I used to work in sales, but when my dad's health deteriorated, I took over the family farm. I'm the second son, but my elder brother moved overseas for work. That left me as the only one to continue the family business. I have a sweet and strong-willed fiancé. I fell head over heels for Ellie the moment I saw her working at our regular cafe, and that's how our relationship started. 2 years into dating, she accepted my marriage proposal. So here I am, about to meet Ellie's parents. Gosh, I'm nervous, I mutter, looking up at the luxurious high-rise where Ellie's parents live. Don't worry, Henry. I've already talked to my mom about you. But my dad, well, that's another story. I've heard her father is a stern man who owns a few restaurants. As nervous as I was, I go in and greet them. To my relief, both warmly welcome me. Sorry that we haven't been able to sync our schedules because of my busy work, the father-in-law began, then started elaborating on how well his company was doing. Henry, I hear you're the top performer in sales. You must be making good money, right? Do you have plans on where you want to live in the future? How about moving into this high-rise condo? All I could do was force a smile at the rapid-fire questions. You're being rude to Henry. said the mother-in-law as she served the tea. "Thank you. This tea is quite good." The delicious flavor helped ease my tension.
"Oh, I'm glad you like it. My brother grows the tea leaves. Our family home has a tea plantation, and they always send us the fresh tea."
The conversation took a lively turn as my mother-in-law and I chatted about the tea. My father-in-law then huffed and said, "A tea plantation, how antiquated. Few households drink tea these days. I wonder when your family home will go out of business." His disparaging remark about her family home left my mother-in-law looking downcast. I had heard somewhere that tea plantations aren't as profitable as they used to be. It's labor-intensive work that requires skill and, above all, manpower. Still, seeing my mother-in-law so disheartened, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. We owe our livelihood to the farmers who work hard to produce our food. We're able to live thanks to the people who grow crops. The same is true for tea. I'm sure many people find comfort in the delicious taste of this tea. At my words, my father-in-law scowled. I seemed to have put him in a bad mood. The timing couldn't have been worse, but I took a deep breath and blurted out, "I've decided to quit my job and take over the family farm. I've decided to protect the land that's been passed down through the generations. Ellie has accepted this, so please, support us in the future." The moment I announced that I had taken over the farm, my father-in-law's face turned red with anger. "A farmer? I agreed to meet you because you were the top-performing sales guy. Ellie, did you lie to me?" My father-in-law, his face filled with anger, turned to Ellie.
"I've tried to talk to you about this many times, but you were too busy. Besides, Mom supports our decision,"
Ellie said, sighing. She must have known it would come to this. Upon hearing that I had switched from my job to farming, my father-in-law's attitude changed dramatically. It was a parade of prejudice against farmers. How dare a poor person living in an old house talk about getting married? It's embarrassing to tell people that my daughter's husband is a farmer and so on. When asked what I was growing, I answered mainly cherry tomatoes, and he exclaimed, "Cherry tomatoes? They don't seem to make much money and there's no future in them." "Of course we're growing more than just tomatoes," I tried to explain, but my father-in-law cut me off and started laughing. "Growing a variety of vegetables is proof that you're not making a profit." He dismissed whatever I said. My father-in-law started a restaurant business at a young age and was successful, so he's particular about profits. Although I've just taken over the farm, I've certainly been considering profits. But as I tried to discuss this, my father-in-law shook his head dismissively. He didn't expect much from me. "I'd like to see what life as a farmer is like. Is your house a shack? Are your parents wearing overalls and straw hats while working? Maybe I should meet them next time." I was getting angry at him making fun of my house and parents, but the one who protested angrily was Ellie.
"I can't believe you're making fun of farmers. I'm ashamed to be your daughter."
At Ellie's words, my father-in-law was enraged and slapped her on the cheek. My mother-in-law was angry that he had raised his hand against her daughter. Ellie, with tears from the pain, turned the situation into complete chaos. "You're living in this high-rise condo thanks to me. Be grateful. I don't care who a daughter like you marries." I took Ellie, who was sobbing, and left my in-laws' house. I couldn't forgive my father-in-law for making fun of farming and for hitting Ellie. "Hello, it's Henry. I'll be bringing my fiancée and her parents next time." I called my father and reported every word of my father-in-law's remarks. "He runs restaurants, doesn't he? What's the name of it?" he asked, so I told him my father-in-law's name and the name of the restaurants he runs. "I have an idea, so wait for me." I asked what he meant by an idea, but he said he was still uncertain and hung up the phone. After a while, my father called back. After hearing from my father, I immediately went to meet some people. Later, Ellie and I went to greet my mother-in-law again. She apologized for my father-in-law's arrogant attitude. He had apparently become arrogant since his restaurant business took off. He moved into a high-rise condo to show off to people around him and began to look down on those who earned less than him. It was a daily occurrence for him to ridicule her family's tea farm. His affairs with women were not hidden, and he did as he pleased, according to my mother-in-law. She said she endured it all for her daughter.
I don't want to cause trouble for Ellie and Henry by getting a divorce.
My mother-in-law is a kind person who thinks of Ellie and me. Don't worry about us. Please think of your own happiness. When I said that, she thanked me and smiled.
I want to help my brother who inherited our family's tea farm. I don't want to see the farm that has been handed down for generations go out of business. He reminded me of the importance of tea farm, Henry. So I'm going to divorce him and go back to my parents' home.
It seemed that my mother-in-law's resolution is already made. The day came when I took my in-laws to my parents' home. After getting off the airplane, we drove for another hour. There were vast fields and farms around us. I can't believe there are houses where people live in such a rural area. My father-in-law spat out in the car. Ellie and my mother-in-law obviously looked uncomfortable, but patient, probably because he could say he wanted to go home if a quarrel started here. I'm looking forward to see the life of a farmer. Is the toilet outside or something? My father-in-law ridiculed my home, laughing uproariously. You'll see when we get there. After driving a while, we saw a large gate and high walls. I'm back. I brought everyone with me. When I spoke to the intercom, the gate opened automatically.
What a grand gate! Oh, and the garden is so beautiful!
Ellie followed me, cheerfully praising the scenery. We leave the garden to a gardener, but it's an English garden, so it's called. Because of my parents who love Europe, there were many of my mother's favorite roses planted. My mother-in-law entered the garden and happily sniffed the scent of the roses. My father-in-law grumbled that it was a bad taste garden. Please, this way. There's a large building beyond the large garden. That is my family home. The brick-built house has 12 rooms and living, dining, kitchen. It's quite spacious. In front of the entrance, there are 2 luxury cars and 3 off-road motorcycles parked. All the land around our house is our own farmland. My in-laws and Ellie were all agape. My parents greeted us at the entrance. Looking at my father-in-law, they showed a smile. Of course, they are not wearing overalls. When I entered the living room, there were relatives and some people gathered. Not only my parents, but everyone was dressed in suits. My father-in-law, insisting that formal attire is unnecessary when meeting farmers, had come in his usual attire of a t-shirt and jeans. Because my mother-in-law, Ellie, and I were dressed relatively formally, he stood out significantly. Hello. Perhaps feeling out of place? My father-in-law said in a small voice, looking down in embarrassment. My father introduced them to the relatives. This is Ellie, Henry's fiancée, and these are Ellie's parents. It seems like Ellie's father has quite a prejudice against farmers. Were you surprised to see that our home was not a shabby hut? The gaze the relatives cast upon my father-in-law was cold. It seemed that my father-in-law had told everyone the story I had told him. No, I mean, that's not... As my father-in-law stammered, several men stepped forward. Why are you guys here? My father-in-law looked surprised with widened eyes. We are disappointed in you, one of the men said, looking at my father-in-law. These men were organic farmers who were actually supplying vegetables to the restaurants my father-in-law runs. Hearing the name of the store, my father made connections and contacted these farmers. My father, who has been a farmer for many years, has many acquaintances. I had directly met them and conveyed my father-in-law's remarks. Apparently, my father-in-law had always been arrogant, and there were many complaints. Those who were outraged that he looked down on farmers so much had come today to directly voice their complaints. We would like to terminate our business relationship at the end of the next contract. Everyone nodded when one of the farmers said this. Wait a minute. Our specialty is organic vegetables. My father-in-law runs several Italian restaurants featuring vegetables popular among the women. Despite this, I thought it was unbelievable to make fun of the farmers who produce the vegetables. I guess for him, anything is fine as long as it makes a profit. He had set his sights on organic vegetables because he thought dumb women should bite if he touted them as healthy food. While my father-in-law was flustered at being told they wanted to stop trading, he is a businessman. He seemed to think that the farmers would also be in trouble if the contract ends. Are you sure about this? You're gonna lose your income, you know. Perhaps he regained his composure and began to threaten, acting high and mighty. Don't worry about that, I interjected, anticipating that my father-in-law would say something like this. The farmers had said they wanted to quit dealing with my father-in-law's company, but they would be in trouble if their source of income decreased. Through my sales job, I had made connections with so many people in various industries. Among them were many restaurant owners and food manufacturers. Even if they extended the deal with my father-in-law, I had introduced them to the next place they could do business, so they wouldn't be in trouble. When I told this fact, my father-in-law visibly started trembling. What am I supposed to do if I can't get vegetables? To my father-in-law, who held his head in his hands, my father said this. Why not ask Henry? We also grow organic vegetables. Despite the ridicule from my father-in-law, we had started focusing on organic farming in our fields, including cherry tomatoes. As a result of repeated improvement in the variety, we were able to harvest quite sweet vegetables. We even had several invitations from companies wanting to contract with us. My father-in-law quickly turned to me, but I just smiled and said, of course, we refuse to do business. He slumped his shoulders and fell silent. Next to the quietened father-in-law, my mother-in-law and our parents were having a lively conversation.
When I bring the fresh tea from my hometown next time,
my mother-in-law declared as my parents were thrilled. In the car on the way back, my father-in-law exploded in anger. How dare you cancel the deal? Do you want my business to go bankrupt? He was shouting from the back seat. Frankly, I couldn't care less about what happens to his restaurants. And you, as my wife, not even defending me. This is why I hate country women. Perhaps because I was completely ignoring him. His anger turned towards my mother-in-law.
Sure, you prefer city women, right? Your current favorite is Mary, isn't it?
When my mother-in-law calmly started talking, the car fell silent.
Henry paid to hire a detective. You didn't hide it at all, so the evidence was easy to obtain. Please take care of the divorce documents and the alimony payments.
My father-in-law turned pale at her words. Divorce? What are you saying? How do you plan to survive without my earnings? She told him she planned to work on the tea farm her brother inherited after the divorce. Then my father-in-law smirked and said, Isn't that tea farm on the verge of bankruptcy? Fine, I'll divorce you. It's better to live with a young woman than an aging wife. Then, no one spoke a word, and a heavy silence filled the car. When we arrived at the airport, not wanting to be together any longer, my father-in-law headed towards the gate alone. Ellie, looking at her father's back, muttered sadly, "To think such a man as my father." "I think your father will definitely regret his choice," I said, pulling Ellie's shoulder towards me. A few days later, my in-laws' divorce was finalized. Due to the evidence of his affair, he was fully liable. He seemed to have nearly forced my mother-in-law, saying, "I'll give you money, just leave." Ellie and I were angry when we heard the story, but my mother-in-law was laughing, saying it was okay since she got a lot of money. $50,000 in alimony from my father-in-law, and $15,000 in alimony from his mistress. She plans to use this money to revive the tea farm. While my father-in-law was enjoying himself at his high-rise condo with his mistress, her husband barged in, turning the place into a battlefield. Yes, my father-in-law's mistress was a married woman. We had known that when we had the detective investigate, so we thought it wouldn't end well. My father-in-law, who was also being sued for alimony by his mistress's husband, must have learned his lesson about women. Even after that, it seems like he's still living alone in his high-rise condo. His bad reputation spread among the farmers, and the number of farms willing to do business with him drastically decreased. That led him to close his branches, which were centered around organic vegetables. Perhaps feeling lonely, I heard that letters from my father-in-law occasionally arrive at my mother-in-law's parents' house. The content is pathetic, asking her to come back because he's lonely. At first, my mother-in-law was reading the letters, but now she says she just throws them away without opening them. Once he called, she cut him off, saying,
"If you're lonely, why don't you move out of the high rise?"
We laughed when we heard that from her. We don't know whether he couldn't stand living alone in a large room or whether his business went under and he couldn't afford to live in the high rise anymore. But we heard that he moved to a small apartment. I've been extremely busy since I took over the farm, but having Ellie with me is a big support. She probably never thought she'd become a farmer's wife when we were dating. Yet, she came with me without a word of complaint, so I have nothing but gratitude for her.
I think I like farming. It must be my mom's blood.
Ellie, laughing, is adorable. A year later, we had our wedding. It was a grand ceremony, but my father-in-law was not there. He must be sad that he couldn't attend his only daughter's wedding. From my mother-in-law, we received freshly packed new tea, saying she wanted us to serve it to the guests. Thanks to my mother-in-law's help, the tea farm, which was on the verge of bankruptcy, seemed likely to turn a significant profit. Their tea is still fragrant and delicious, as always.
I'm Emma, 34 years old. I went to vocational school and spent my 20s working in healthcare, directly in facilities. I absolutely love this job where clients often show their gratitude, and I take great pride in it. I was inspired to get into caregiving by my grandpa. He was gentle and always made time for me, but he had a stroke when I was in middle school. The home care staff who came to assist him taught me some basic caregiving skills. It wasn't just grandpa. I wanted to help a lot of people in need, so I decided to pursue a career in social welfare. I have a younger sister, Olivia, who's 8 years my junior. She's the second child my parents always wanted, and she's been spoiled her entire life. As a result, she's grown into a rather self-centered person. When I started working, Olivia was still in middle school. Whenever I'd talk about work at home, she'd say, "Ew, Emma, you help strangers in the bathroom? That's gross. Keep away from me." She'd mockingly laugh at me. I'm the quiet type, so I'd never talk back. I had to confront Olivia about her selfishness before, but she's so good with words that she shut me down every time. Because of those tough experiences, I couldn't bring myself to say out loud what I really thought about her character. Olivia, on the other hand, has a free-spirited personality and lots of friends. Her dating life has never hit a dry spell either. "My friend just married a CEO and now parties every day. I want to join the elite crowd too," she'd say. Olivia frequently attended high-profile dinner parties, and she managed to get engaged to the heir of a private hospital. Ironically, this hospital is where I work, and her fiancé, Derek, is an acquaintance of mine. Olivia, uninterested in my life, probably has no idea. I've also kept mum about knowing Derek. "I've decided to get engaged to Olivia. She's just like you. Emma, such a great person." Derek shared his engagement news with me, making me feel quite conflicted. I can't help but think Olivia is putting on a front for him. Though I had my concerns about Derek, if they love each other, there's nothing to be done but wish them well. It seems the wedding will be a grand affair, just as Olivia desires. "I'm planning a surprise to dazzle Olivia on the big day," Derek confided in me. I told him I'd help out in any way I could. It's their moment to shine after all. Time to get new dresses and shoes ready for the wedding. As her sister, I even splurged on an expensive necklace I'd never normally buy, just to make sure she wouldn't be embarrassed by me. Then, out of nowhere, Olivia called me the day before the wedding. "I heard from Derek that there will be some VIP guests, so you, the poor Emma, better not come." I was stunned. "Wait, you're saying you don't want your own sister there? Wouldn't that offend people?" Cutting me off, she sneered, "I'm joining the elite, you know. It's embarrassing to have a sister in caregiving. Caregiving jobs are filthy, tough, and low-paying. They're bottom of the barrel work. Olivia always disdains other people's jobs despite never having worked a day in her life. Always making excuses about her jobs being boring or beneath her." She continued, "The VIPs are Derek's mentors. They're high-status people. I can't be introducing them to poor Emma." Hearing Olivia laugh while she said it made my blood boil. Why demean caregiving so much? There are many people whose lives are better because of this profession. Apparently, Olivia, the naive rich girl, can't even fathom that. Well, she'll regret it then. I held back my retort, simply saying, "All right, got it," and hung up. Then came the wedding day. The panicked staff relayed to Olivia, "One of the guests has abruptly canceled." Seems like Olivia didn't think much of it. However, the situation was more dire than she expected. The staff were flustered. Derek was consulting my parents. It makes sense. The surprise introduction of the VIP guest was ruined. Then I got a call from Mom. "What's this about you not coming, Emma? Everyone's waiting." I told her the blunt truth. "Olivia told me not to come because I'm poor. I feel bad for Derek, but I can't go now." I heard my mom sigh heavily on the other end. "That does sound like something she'd say. Are you sure you won't come?" "I can't, not after my sister has uninvited me. I'm sorry." I cut off Mom's words and responded that way. "All right, I get it. There's no helping it. I'll talk to Derek." Mom went straight to Derek and seemingly relayed what Olivia told me. You didn't have to see Derek's reaction to know what he was feeling. "It's the first time I've ever seen Derek so angry," Mom told me later. Olivia, having changed into her dress, was nonchalantly scrolling through her phone, unconcerned with the staff's frenzy. She probably posted a selfie in her dress on social media and was collecting likes from everyone. Classic Olivia, always seeking validation. "Who was the big guest supposed to be anyway?" she asked the venue staff. That's when she first heard the name of the guest. "Derek's big guest is Why is it? Suddenly, the room filled with whispers. Venue staff began apologizing to each attendee and started escorting them out. Olivia looked puzzled, not understanding why people were leaving. When she angrily asked, the staff told her something unexpected. The groom has asked that we send the attendees home. A stunned Olivia confronted the staff. What do you mean? What did Derek say? He said a wedding without guests is meaningless. Olivia hadn't realized how much Derek valued the guests. She wasn't aware of his surprise plans, so it was understandable. Thinking the ceremony could proceed as long as there were guests, Olivia finally got a grip on the situation and urgently called someone. Meanwhile, I was at home, leisurely sipping tea. Olivia must be freaking out right about now. Just as I predicted, a frantic call came in from Olivia. Emma, get here quick. What are you talking about? You told me not to come yesterday. As I responded calmly, I heard screaming on the other end. If there are no guests, it's pointless. Derek is sending everyone home, and why are you the big guest? I couldn't help but smile at Olivia's ranting over the phone. She wouldn't stop insisting that I come, so I reluctantly decided to head to the venue. It would be inconvenient if she showed up in my home in her dress. When I arrived at the venue, Olivia greeted me with a devilish expression. Convince Derek now, you useless person, and what do you mean you're the big guest? It makes no sense. Apparently, Derek hadn't yet explained our relationship. It's all your fault our wedding is ruined, Olivia vented at me. I thought to myself, the real issue is that you didn't invite me in the first place. But I chose to remain silent. I noticed people gathering behind Olivia. Of course, a bride in a dress with a devilish expression would draw attention, and the crowd was growing. Knowing my mean-spirited sister, she would probably throw out more insults. You might want to stop talking. I tried to warn her as her sister, but Olivia was unstoppable. Shut up. I was generous to invite you, a broke caregiver, so be grateful. The onlookers around us had clearly lost all respect for her. Even Olivia's friends seemed embarrassed and left the venue. Olivia had lost her friends, but it was all her own doing. Men, who appeared to be Derek's friends, kept their distance and began bad-mouthing Olivia. No one would want their friend's fiancé to be like this. As I silently watched Olivia, who was still treating caregivers like poor people, familiar faces appeared. It was Derek, his parents, and our own parents who saw Olivia berating me. Rushing over with a face red in anger was Derek. He had been told by the staff that the bride was causing a scene and had hurried over. Olivia, who had been berating me non-stop, suddenly turned pale the moment she saw Derek. The mask she had been wearing shattered in that instant. No, wait, it's not what you think. Emma didn't show up on time, so I was just wondering why she would skip without notice. Olivia stuttered and started making excuses, but Derek knew Olivia was lying because he heard from Mom why I was absent. You told her not to come, didn't you? Derek's shoulders were shaking with anger. He must have been incredibly disillusioned to see his friend, me, being insulted and lied to. Besides, whoever heard of a bride causing a scene at her own wedding with so many people watching? Derek looked down at Olivia as if she were trash. Emma is a care manager at our hospital. She's the person who helped me through tough times. There was a period when Derek was struggling with whether to take over the hospital management. He often said he couldn't become the head of the hospital because he wasn't getting along with veteran doctors. Seeing Derek down, I stepped in to help mediate relationships. I'd often encourage him, saying he'd do just fine when he was feeling low and lacking confidence. He still thanks me for that and calls me his benefactor. Derek is diligent and has been studying hard to take over the hospital. I've been giving him various tips from my perspective as a care manager. Before we knew it, we had become like siblings who could consult each other about anything. I said she was a big guest because I wanted to surprise you, Olivia. It was supposed to be a special appearance by Emma. Derek thought Olivia would be thrilled to find out her sister was also her fiancé's mentor. But what he actually saw was Olivia berating me. Derek must have already made up his mind. His angry face turned serious and he said, "I can clearly see now that you look down on welfare workers. You seem to have told Emma to skip the ceremony because she's poor. I don't want to marry a woman like that. I've already decided to call off the engagement, which is why I was sending guests home." Olivia was at a loss for words. She was desperately trying to persuade him not to cancel the wedding now. But Derek wasn't the only one who was angry after hearing our exchange. Derek's dad, the hospital director, was also furious. "I can't tolerate anyone who disrespects our staff on the front lines. My wife and I are both against this marriage." The director speaks in a firm tone. He not only focuses on medical care, but also on elder care, treating his staff with kindness. It was the first time anyone had seen the usually gentle director get angry. Derek's mom used to be a homemaker, but now volunteers at a senior care facility. She, too, is visibly angry, perhaps because of her close relationship with the caregiving staff. Olivia, disapproved of by both her fiancé and his parents, is visibly shaken. Then she turns her pleading eyes towards me. "Emma, what I said earlier was just a joke. You understand me, right?" She probably thought if Derek and I were close, I could convince him. But I'm sure she also thinks I'd listen because she's always looked down on me. It's clear what my shallow sister is thinking. Facing Olivia, I smile sarcastically and say, "It's too late for apologies. You made your bed, now lie in it. I have no intention of convincing Derek." At this change in me, Olivia is both surprised and dumbfounded. Derek is like a brother to me. If he's decided to break off the engagement, I will respect his decision. I'm actually relieved he came to his senses. "You wouldn't say that, Emma. Mom and Dad are on my side, right?" Realizing I won't help her, Olivia glances at our parents. Noticing this, I say to my parents, who had been looking down in shame, "If you spoil Olivia here, she'll just make the same mistakes." Both Mom and Dad nod quietly. Our parents often complain to me that they might have raised Olivia wrong. Though usually lenient with their youngest, they seem ready to change their approach to Olivia. "We apologize for causing you discomfort. It's our fault for spoiling Olivia. We respect Derek's decision and agree to end the engagement." With no one on her side, Olivia collapses to her knees. And so, the engagement between Olivia and Derek comes to an end. The wedding was initially going to be fully funded by Derek and his parents. We'll cover the cancellation fees, as our parents have offered to help. Given that we are planning a lavish wedding, the amount will be substantial. Olivia still seemed to think our parents would bail her out. Even after hearing the sum, she acted as if it didn't concern her. Derek, who initiated the break, suggested they split the fee. Mom, who had been discussing the amount, says, "Olivia, you'll have to pay this back, even if it takes a lifetime. Neither we nor Emma will provide any financial assistance." Caught off guard, Olivia starts to panic and cry. She's unemployed and has never held a job for long. Without a stable work history, she'd likely get turned down even if she did apply for jobs. Unable to find work and claiming she can't pay, I found her a job. The job was in elder care, the very field Olivia had been mocking. "It's the perfect place for you to straighten up," I tell her. I take her to a senior care facility run by a strict, seasoned staff. As she's my sister, please feel free to train her rigorously, I say. We had told the veteran in advance about Olivia's situation. She doesn't have a caregiving license, so she'd start at minimum wage, and no matter how hard she works, she'll initially bring home just a bit over $1,000. That money will go entirely toward paying off the wedding venue's cancellation fees. Olivia can't rely on her parents for spending money anymore, so her days of extravagant fun are over. She's drifted away from her friends and seems to be shuttling just between home and work. She's had to sell off her designer items that she used to get as gifts from her parents and boyfriend because she's short on cash. Even then, it will likely take her years to pay off the full amount. Who would have thought Olivia, who used to look down on caregiving as a dirty job, would end up doing tasks like toilet assistance? Since then, it seems Olivia has been getting harshly scolded by the veteran every day and works while crying. Even after breaking off their engagement, Derek still cares for me as he always has. A few years later, he introduced me to his new girlfriend, saying he found someone truly kind this time. Seeing her smile, saying she fell for Derek's personality and not his status as an heir, I genuinely blessed their relationship, convinced they'd be happy. As for me, I continue my work as a care manager.
I'm really grateful you're here. Thank you.
Today, like every day, I'm thanked by the people I serve, and it makes me appreciate the worthiness of my job.
Wouldn't it be nice to practice taking care of each other in our old age by doing household chores? And also practice for when you have kids by looking after them. It's a win-win, right?
Susie, my mother-in-law glares at me as if to say, "What's your problem?" In the background, my sister-in-law's husband and my father-in-law Raymond are already assembling a crib without asking. Right before my eyes, preparations for moving in together are rapidly underway. My husband, looking amused, meets my stern gaze. My name is Miranda. I live with my husband, Michael. We met through work and started dating. I was always busy with work, so I didn't have any other opportunities to meet people. Michael told me he liked me from the moment we met, but I initially thought of him as just a business contact. So when he first asked me out, I was genuinely surprised. Although I wasn't initially interested in Michael, I was in my late 20s, and with a little push from friends, I decided to give dating him a try. Both of us had little experience in love, so it was an awkward date. But spending time with Michael was genuinely enjoyable. Fast forward about 3 years, and Michael and I decided to get married. We were both quite successful for being just shy of 30, and with our combined income, we bought a spacious house on a mortgage. My dream was to raise a family and have a dog here with Michael. I thought Michael felt the same way. At least that's what I thought when we first moved into the house. But about 6 months after getting married, I realized Michael no longer shared that dream. My sister-in-law Elsie got pregnant. Elsie lived nearby and would occasionally visit, but her visits increased significantly after her pregnancy. She would often show up unannounced, and I was even shocked to find her sitting at our front door after a shopping trip. When I found her, she angrily said, "How could you leave a pregnant woman waiting outside?" But I had no idea she was coming. I was already juggling a hectic life, balancing work and household chores, and adding Elsie to the mix made it unbearable. She would show up early in the morning saying, "Our washing machine is acting up, so I thought I'd bring my laundry for you to do," or come over at home with her husband and say, "We're hungry, feed us." I was at my wit's end with Elsie and consulted Michael, but he just said, "What's the big deal? Elsie is my sister and she's your sister-in-law. It's natural for her to visit." He took no action. I realized nothing would change unless I took action, so I finally told Elsie, "This is becoming a problem." I asked her to stop burdening me with chores in the early morning and to quit timing her dinner visits for when I get off work. Then Elsie left in tears, and who shows up but Raymond and Susie. We live near my in-laws because Michael suggested it would be convenient for when we have kids. That decision backfired as Raymond and Susie came over for what seemed like retaliation for how Elsie was treated. I was made to sit on the floor and was berated for being a terrible woman. I already knew these two didn't like me much. They were kind to me before we got married, but their attitude changed when I said I would continue working after marriage. They held old-fashioned views that a woman should stay home after marriage. They also cared a lot about appearances and lectured me multiple times about how my working might make people think Michael doesn't earn enough. I didn't quit my job, so they started disliking me. I had reservations about building a house near them, but they're important to Michael. I thought their attitude might soften when they have grandchildren, so I went ahead with it. Big mistake. They scolded me for over an hour, saying it was terrible not to help Elsie, who's pregnant. "What if something happens to the baby?" they said, and then demanded drinks when they were tired from their lecture. Even the coffee I made was criticized as being bad and bitter after they left. I was so frustrated that I cried. I even told Michael, "If Raymond and Susie are going to be involved, I want a divorce."
Michael was shocked by the word divorce, but seeing me cry, he comforted me saying,
I didn't know you were feeling so cornered.
he promised to talk to his parents, and a week later, Elsie's baby was born. It was a cute girl, and both Michael and I melted when we saw the pictures. A week later, when I was idly thinking about wanting a child with Michael, Elsie showed up at our house, and she didn't come alone. She brought her husband, Raymond, and Susie, cheerfully announcing, "We're here!" As I stood confused, Elsie's husband walked in carrying large bags and said,
We'll be counting on you from today.
What? I was confused, but Elsie's husband and Raymond were carrying a lot of luggage into our house from the car they had parked in front of our house. What's going on? When I asked Susie, who was sorting through the items in the entranceway, what was going on, she snapped at me. "Why don't you help out? You're so clueless." Still not understanding, I went to the living room followed by Raymond and Elsie's husband carrying something large. Elsie directed them to place it near the living room window. What they pulled out of the box was a crib. "Michael, what's going on? What is this?"
It's a surprise.
"A surprise?"
Look, Miranda, you've been having a hard time with Dad and Mom, right? I thought if we all lived together, you would see how great they are and get along.
"What are you talking about?" I frowned at Michael's behavior. Michael was still smiling, thinking he had done something good for me. As I took a deep breath to complain, Elsie, holding her baby, glared at me and said, "What's your problem? We're family. There's no issue with us living together." "So as family, Elsie will help with the household chores like I do?" "Of course not. I have a baby to take care of, and I just gave birth a week ago. You really need to think before you speak." "That's right. Besides, this living arrangement is also for your own benefit, Miranda." Before Susie knew it, she had wandered into the living room and seemed to have heard what Elsie was saying. Agreeing to Elsie's baffling remarks, Susie started to say even more incomprehensible things. "Miranda, we'll have to take care of each other in our old age, and if a child comes along, we'll naturally have to raise it. That's why we agreed to Michael's suggestion to live together as practice for all that." What? "So we'll practice taking care of the house for our future and also practice childcare for when you have kids. Isn't that great?" No matter how many times I heard it, the response would likely be the same. I was stunned for a moment, then shot Michael the root cause of this mess a piercing glare. Michael just smiled and said,
Miranda must be happy too, right?
I felt a chill thinking that this man might not understand his wife's feelings or anyone else's. For that matter, he must have noticed my displeasure. Suddenly, Michael's mood soured, realizing his surprise had failed.
What's the matter? You don't like it? Well, Dad, Mom, and Elsie have all decided to live here. If you don't like it, you can leave.
I couldn't take it anymore. I quietly headed to the bedroom and grabbed the divorce papers I had hidden in the bedside drawer. I had prepared these papers when I previously discussed issues with Michael. I never thought I would actually use them, but their time has come. I returned to the living room and handed Michael the divorce papers. "I'm leaving." I calmly made my declaration and began to prepare to leave, pulling out a large suitcase I had stored in the closet. At first, Michael was saying things like,
Why? I did this for you, Miranda.
But when he saw I was ignoring him, he filled in the blanks on the divorce papers and handed them back to me without a word. I took them silently and put them in my bag. While I was packing, Raymond, Susie, and Elsie mocked me, saying, "Did Michael dump you?" But the truth is, I'm the one who's leaving him. The ones who would be in trouble once I left were definitely Michael and his family. Convinced of this, I packed everything I needed into my suitcase and took refuge at a friend's house for a while. I couldn't impose on my friend forever, so I immediately started looking for a new place to live. I found a promising place near my work, and it took about a month to move out. During that time, there was no contact from Michael. I didn't care, as it was only natural since we were divorced, but just as I had finished moving, I got a call from Michael. When I picked up the phone, thinking Michael might have forgotten something, he blurted out,
Help me.
According to Michael, things at his home had gone from bad to worse. The constant crying of a baby had left everyone sleep-deprived, and fights were breaking out due to the tension. Michael and his family all disliked and were bad at housework, leading to more arguments about who should do what. As a result, chores piled up, garbage and dirty dishes accumulated, and flies began to infest the house. Moreover, Michael admitted he hadn't thought about finances and was now in a tight spot.
I can't pay off the mortgage on my own.
The only ones working in Michael's household were Michael and Elsie's husband. But soon after moving in, Elsie and her husband had a huge fight, leading to their divorce and departure. Just like us, as a result, Michael was left to pay the mortgage originally intended to be split between the two of us. Supporting Raymond, Susie, Elsie, and Elsie's baby while paying off the mortgage would be tough. I was surprised to hear about Elsie's husband leaving, but I had always known Michael would eventually struggle with the mortgage. Still, I couldn't forgive Michael for unilaterally deciding to live together and telling me to leave if I didn't like it.
Where are you now? Things are really bad here. Dad and Mom are getting sick and Elsie isn't helping with anything. She even takes money from my wallet.
Do you think calling me back will solve your problems? I don't understand why you think my return would fix anything. You're not just trying to use me as a housekeeper to lighten your load, are you? When I said this sarcastically, Michael fell silent. I wanted to live happily with you in that house. You're the one who ruined it. I don't need to see it to know you're struggling. With parents and a sister like that, it must be tough. But you chose this, so you'll have to deal with it.
Dad, Mom, and Elsie are more than just selfish.
It's fine. You said it yourself. Living together might make everyone get along. Michael had decided to move in together as a surprise to make me, Raymond, Susie, and Elsie get along. When I reminded him of this, he hesitated and said,
Well,
anyway, we're divorced now, so it's none of my business. Good luck with the housework for your future caregiving and the childcare practice for when you have a new wife and kids. With that, I hung up and blocked Michael's number. I later heard about what happened to Michael and his family from a friend who had supported me during our marriage and provided a refuge during our divorce. This friend worked with Michael and had grown up in the same town, so they were in the loop. Michael continued to live in the house we had built, but the neighbors had a poor opinion of him. The constant crying of the baby and the insect-infested garbage-filled house had earned him their disdain. Raymond and Susie were in poor health, frequently going in and out of the hospital. Michael was taking care of them while also raising Elsie's child. Elsie apparently found a new boyfriend and left the house, neglecting her own child in the process. When she returned, she was pregnant, and it turned out her new lover was already married. Even Michael couldn't contain his anger at Elsie and kicked her out of the house. Elsie, who had been financially supporting her new boyfriend, was now in debt and working a demanding job that provided lodging just to make ends meet. While I was shocked at how far Michael's household had fallen, it felt like poetic justice. As for me, I also found a new love. But my boyfriend is a single man, not a married one. He's gentle and kind, and his occasional endearing blunders make him all the more lovable. He doesn't mind that I've been divorced and is willing to consider marriage at a pace that suits me, given my previous fears about it. So we decided to live together first and are now cohabiting in a new apartment. His parents are incredibly kind and have already decided to move into a care facility when they're older, so as not to be a burden on us. Our wish is not to trouble our children. If you and Miranda focus on your own happiness, that's all we could ask for, said my new mother-in-law, Sandra. Her words were so wonderful, I wished I could share them with Michael and his family. Recently, my boyfriend proposed to me, and we plan to get married in a few months. This time, I truly believe this marriage will lead to my happiness. My name is Maya. I come from a long line of doctors. My dad and my brother are both physicians. But I was never good at studying, so med school was out of the question for me. Instead, I went to a specialized school for design because I loved drawing. Now, I work at a design agency. Even though I chose a different path, my parents never had a problem with it. However, the same can be said for Eloise, my sister-in-law who married my brother. Maya, are you hiding in your room again? I keep telling you I'm working. You sure you're not just messing around? Of course not. Just like any other job, weekdays during the day are my working hours. I work in web design. So as long as I have a computer, I can work from home. But Eloise just doesn't get it. Sure, you're doing that work from home thing, right? I know what that is. If you say so. But work from home jobs are more like pocket money, right? Hard to call that a real job. Eloise always says stuff like this, trying to one me up. Finally, I had no choice but to talk to my brother about it. He explained to Eloise what my job entails, but Eloise still didn't understand. So I started going to the design office a few times a week. Seeing this, Eloise suddenly changed her tune. It seems she finally realized I have a real job. Ever since, she stopped complaining and kept her distance from my room. That's not to say my relationship with Eloise got worse. If anything, Eloise has been the one trying to improve our relationship. Maya, I bought some cake while shopping. Please have some. Thank you, Eloise. Now, conversations like this have become an everyday occurrences. Sometimes I buy souvenirs for Eloise when I go to work. In this way, our relationship gradually improved. Then, on one particular Sunday, when I went to the living room, my brother Nolan was loudly talking on the phone.
Got it? I'm on my way.
What's going on, big brother?
It's an emergency call. I was planning to go out with Eloise and Carlos since mom and dad are not around.
Carlos is the name of my brother's son, so Carlos is my nephew. Seeing my brother looking a bit distressed, Eloise turned to me and said, How about it, Maya? Why don't the three of us go out for lunch? Me? Why not? Nolan seems busy and it's a perfect opportunity. That makes sense. I smiled and nodded. Then my brother also approved of us going out looking relieved. So after sending off my brother, we left the house. But my smile only lasted until then, because Eloise took us to a high-end restaurant I have never been to before. I froze in front of the restaurant and blurted, Are we really eating at such an upscale place? Do you not like it? Eloise tilted her head. It's not that bad, but it looks pretty expensive. Don't worry, this place is Nolan's regular spot. Well, it's different for Nolan since he's a doctor, but even though I come from a family of doctors, I'm just an ordinary person working at a regular company. I'm not rich, and I earn a regular salary. I felt quite intimidated. However, thinking that it's all part of gaining experience, I went into the restaurant with Eloise. The inside of the restaurant felt even more luxurious than I thought. The ingredients were fresh and both the taste and service were top-notch. Getting caught up in the atmosphere, I ended up consuming about $200 worth of food in no time. Looking over, I noticed that Eloise had eaten just as much. Carlos, although not as much as us, had consumed food worth a few tens of dollars. Feeling rattled, I suggested to Eloise, Carlos has eaten quite a bit too. How about we split the bill? But Eloise laughed and said, What are you talking about? I invited you, so I'll pay. But it's going to be pretty expensive. Don't worry, it's fine. Eloise kept smiling. I felt overwhelmed, thinking this must be what it looks like to be a doctor's wife and wealthy. While I was pondering this, Eloise told the staff, We would like the bill, please. I'm sorry, Eloise. Thanks for treating us. Of course, Maya. You're my sister, even if it's just by marriage. I had always been doted on by my older brother. Still, I thought having a sister would have been nice if she treated me like this. Just as I thought this, Eloise let out a yelp while rummaging through her bag. Oh no! I forgot my wallet. What? I must have left it somewhere. Eloise tilted her head as she spoke, while the cashier, looking increasingly annoyed. Eloise, are you okay? Worried, I spoke to Eloise. Sorry, Maya, could you cover the bill? Me? Well, I can't help it. It's too much to settle with mobile payment. Yeah, I guess so. In the end, I had no choice but to pay with my card. Afterwards, Eloise kept apologizing. I was really careless. I'm so sorry. It's fine. You'll pay me back, right? Oh, I'll definitely pay you back. Don't worry. I believed Eloise's words, but my trust was broken. I reminded her several times when we got home, But Alois kept making excuses, never paying me back. Eventually, my brother came home and Alois started preparing dinner. I guess I'll just chalk this one up as a lesson learned. I tried reminding her the next day too, but the result was the same. Alois kept making excuses and dodging the issue. Gradually, I gave up on getting paid back. I am never going out for meals with her again. I had decided that in my heart. Just then, my mom approached me with some news. Maya, you're free this Sunday, right? Yeah, why? Your father and I have decided to go on a day trip bus tour for peach picking. Oh, that sounds like a nice getaway for you two. Don't worry about me. Go ahead and enjoy yourself. So, I'll be out on Sunday. Nolan said he'll be at a conference too. Can you keep an eye on things with Alois? Uh-huh. My brother won't be here either? According to Mom, my brother would also be away attending a conference. What's more, Mom even gave Alois some money for lunch before heading out. Use that money to take Carlos to a fast food place, will you? I would rather not. You're family now. You don't need to be so formal. That's not the point. I really wanted to refuse, but I couldn't. So it was decided. On Sunday, Alois, Carlos, and I would go to a fast food restaurant. And then came Sunday. Once my parents and brother had left, Alois approached me. Hey, Maya, you know, about taking Carlos to the fast food place? Right. Yeah, but are you uneasy about it? Well, given what happened last time, I'm a bit anxious. Don't worry, we can pay with just our phones these days. Who forgets their phone? Alois chuckled and showed me her phone. Indeed, we could easily pay at a fast food place using mobile payments. Plus, Alois is always on social media, so there is no way she would forget her phone. Reassured, the three of us left the house. We went to a nearby fast food chain. The prices were reasonable, and I enjoyed my burger without any concern. But then, as we headed to the counter to pay, oh no! I forgot my wallet again! Alois feigned surprise, but I calmly pointed out, you said we could pay with our phones, remember? Oh, right, I totally forgot. Then please go ahead and pay, Alois. I thought it was going smoothly this time, but then the cashier gave us a strange look. Sorry, but it seems like your phone is out of battery. Do you have cash? Oh no, my battery's dead. Now I can't use my phone. Alois glanced at me. In that moment, I knew I had been fooled again. Alois smirked unpleasantly. I realized immediately that she had deliberately let her phone die. In other words, she never intended to pay from the start. Could you cover for me? Again? Come on, there are people waiting behind us. Sure enough, the fast food place is packed with families. A long line of customers is waiting to check out behind me. I can't hold everyone up. I pull out my wallet, pay, and move on. Outside the restaurant, I ask Alois, you got lunch money from Mom, right? So you're going to pay me back. I know. I'm holding you to your promise. Make sure you pay me back. I reiterate, though not happily. Yet, that promise was never kept. True to form, or maybe just typical Alois, she found ways to dodge me. Eventually, my parents came home. They start recounting their travel stories, and my concern gets brushed aside. I am never eating out with her again. This time, I make a firm mental note. Sure, I could have talked to my brother about it, but I owe my freedom to him in many ways. If he hadn't become a doctor, I would have been subjected to intense studying. I can't worry him over something like this. Swallowing my frustration, I give in. After that, I take precautions to avoid being used by Alois. For example, I limit unnecessary conversations with her and spend more time at the office. I distance myself from her. My parents seem puzzled, but I brush it off. Should have done this from the start. I feel more at ease with fewer interactions with Alois. Then one day, as I got home, I see Mom handing Alois an envelope. What's going on? I ask Alois instantly. I'm concerned that Mom might be getting taken advantage of like I was. However, the reality seemed quite different. This is the money I had your mom withdraw from the ATM for me. For what? I want to have dinner with Maya. Oh, with me? A surprised me hears a somewhat lonely Alois continue. We haven't had much time to talk recently, right? I've been feeling a bit lonely.
Ready to talk about dinner?
Yeah, I booked a fancy restaurant for tomorrow night. Is that okay with you?
Well, sure.
Great, my treat. Let's go eat together. I find it hard to say no in front of my mom. If I did, she would think Alois and I weren't getting along, especially if she knew money was making things awkward. She would worry. I don't want to cause her any stress, so I had no choice but to nod in agreement. The next evening, Alois insisted we take a taxi. She even specified an elegant lace dress, so the place has to be legit. A little anxious, we soon arrive at a luxury hotel. How much is it? Alois asks the driver as she reaches into her bag for that familiar envelope. I can cover the taxi fare. I interject. Alois puts the envelope back into her bag. Are you sure? I was the one who invited you. Yes, I'd feel bad if I didn't at least contribute this much. I have no obligation to pay the taxi, of course. But who knows what she would say later if she pays for everything. With that thought, I pay the taxi fare. We then proceed to a high-end French restaurant on the hotel's top floor. A place this upscale, are you sure? I did make you pay a few times, so consider this an apology. Alois smiles. If she really feels that way, she could just give me back the money. But today, Alois is treating me. I double-checked that envelope when we got out of the taxi, so she should definitely be covering the bill today. I felt reassured. Soon enough, the menu arrives. The $300 price tag does catch my eye, but the food is exceptional. The service is top-notch and I thoroughly enjoy the meal. So how was it? It was delicious. A meal worth $300 certainly feels luxurious. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Shall we head out? Alois smiles and calls over the service staff. The server brings the bill discreetly. So this is how they settle accounts in a high-end place. While I am marveling at this, Alois takes out that familiar envelope from her bag. But the moment Alois opened the envelope, her face turned pale. Uh-oh, the contents have been switched. What Alois pulled out from the envelope was toy money. Showing it to me, she shamefully said, I'm sorry, Maya. Carlos must have played a prank. For the first time, I felt my blood run cold. I hadn't expected Alois to go to such lengths. You did bring your wallet, right? I thought the money in the envelope would be enough, so I didn't bring it. What should we do? Alois spoke in a conspicuously artificial tone. Was all of this planned? I was pretty angry, but I couldn't keep the staff waiting. Well, I guess I'll pay with my card. I'm sorry, I was supposed to treat you. There's nothing we can do now. Holding back my anger, I pulled out my card. On reflection, there had been several hints. Even when getting out of the taxi, Alois had shown that envelope. Going to a fancy place like this and bringing an envelope of cash was suspicious any way you looked at it. I should have realized something was off when she didn't switch the money to her wallet. I hated myself for not catching on to something so simple. However, based on past experiences, I figured it would be hard to get the money back from Alois. In the end, all I could master when I got home and told my family was, it was good. Of course, I wanted to get back at Alois, but there was nothing I could do. I even thought that maybe leaving home would solve everything. Maybe that's better than seeking revenge. That's when I started seriously considering living on my own. But setting up an independent life requires preparation. So for just a bit longer, I decided to put up with living with Alois until I could make this preparation. As I was thinking all this, a long holiday was approaching. My family would also be holding the 13th memorial service for my grandfather, so all my relatives would gather. It would be busy, but since my parents were taking days off, I figured there would be some time to talk. Then, on the day of the gathering, there was no time to have a leisurely conversation when all the relatives came together. Both adults and children were many, and being the host, I was super busy. In the midst of this, my mom asked, Maya, could you please go to the grocery store with the kids? Why? You know how boring adult gatherings are for kids. Why don't you go to the grocery store with them and buy some candy or something? I get it, but taking care of them all by myself will be a lot. I was saying this when suddenly a voice sounded from behind me. If that's the case, I'll go with you. Turning around, I saw Aloysa's mom, Lisa, standing there. Apparently, Lisa had worked as a nurse in the hospital around the same time as my grandfather, and she was here today for his memorial service. All right, I appreciate it. Then, Lisa and I took a few kids to the nearby grocery store. I had only met Lisa once before at my brother's wedding. Knowing she's Aloysa's mom made me anxious. Still, I figured it was better than looking after a bunch of kids alone. Turns out Lisa was nothing like Aloys. She made sure the kids walked on the sidewalk and kept quiet in the store. A very sensible person indeed. Aloys could learn a thing or two from her mom. Of course, I kept that thought to myself, but I couldn't help wondering if Aloys and Lisa were really mother and daughter. Eventually, the kids finished picking up their snacks and started lining up at the checkout. Both Lisa and I stood by watching them make their purchases. That's when it happened. Carlos, who was in line, suddenly made a fuss. "Forgot my wallet. Can you pay for me?" he asked another kid who had come along. Lisa and I hurried over to Carlos. "What's the matter, Carlos? Didn't you bring any money?" Lisa asked. Carlos then pulled out his wallet and said, "I have money, but if I say I forgot it, people usually pay for me." "Why shouldn't you pay for it yourself? My mom always does it this way. She even did it when she went to a restaurant with my aunt." Upon hearing this, Lisa looked back at me. You're Maya, right? Is what Carlos is saying true?" "Well, yes. Generally speaking, I did end up paying when she said she forgot her wallet." "I see," Lisa quietly replied, but her face was beet red and she looked quite angry. In the end, Lisa managed to convince Carlos to settle down. Carlos obediently paid for his items and we left the grocery store. What came next was the real challenge. Prompted by Lisa, we all ended up running back home. As soon as we got back, Lisa burst into the room where all the relatives were gathered. "Aloys, come here now." Mom?
"Sit down right here."
What's going on?"
"Just come here quickly." In front of all the relatives, Lisa sat Aloys down. She began to question Carlos about what he had done at the grocery store. Aloys visibly paled and started making excuses.
That's not what happened."
"What do you mean, not what happened? You had Maya pay, didn't you?"
"Yes, I had her pay, but I paid her back."
As Aloys said this, Lisa looked at me. Seizing the opportunity, I blurted out, "She hasn't paid me back, not for the fancy restaurant or the fast food place, nothing at all."
"What are you talking about, Maya? I did pay you back, see?"
For some reason, Aloys winked at me. Is she asking for help? But helping her now would only encourage her behavior. "No, you haven't. You owe me $10,000 and I haven't received a single dollar." I said it loud and clear. Immediately, all the relatives started to get angry. "How could you do this, Aloys? Are you kidding me? Don't you feel ashamed?" Angry shouts filled the room. I later heard that among the people gathered for my grandfather, there were many of Aloys's relatives. Faced with their collective scorn, Aloys was silenced like a snuffed-out flame. Afterwards, Aloys apologized to everyone. Finally, she came over with Lisa and said,
"I'm sorry, Maya. I'll pay you back, I promise."
"I understand. Just make sure you do." Aloys continued to get an earful from Lisa. After that, Aloys became much quieter around the house. She did pay me back, so I decided to let it go. However, my brother, who found out about all this, said he wanted to make it right. So I started looking for a place to live on my own. While doing so, Aloys offered to cover my moving costs and 6 months of rent. It seems getting scolded by Lisa really got to her, but she still wanted to get back in my good graces. Well, I accepted what she was offering with gratitude. Now, I have finished moving and I'm enjoying living on my own. I do feel a bit lonely sometimes, but I have no intention of going back home because I don't want to deal with Aloys. So now I'm looking for a partner to share my life with.
Hey, big bro.
How many times have you played princess in this car? Out of the blue, my 5-year-old niece Tiana asked this question. Huh? While driving, my husband Corey responded with a surprised look. What do you mean, playing princess? Well, have you had a lot of princesses in the car? Tiana's odd comment was a turning point. It led me to discover the true identity of my husband. I'm Annie, a 25-year-old office worker. I've recently tied the knot. My husband? Corey, a co-worker. Corey started at the company the same year I did. He's not just good at his job, he's also incredibly good-looking, a real catch from day one. 2 colleagues, Sylvia and Angelica, both a couple of years my senior, clearly had their eyes on him. They often came over to Corey's desk offering to help with work or bringing him snacks, clearly trying to get his attention. One day, I found myself invited to a social gathering by Sylvia and Angelica. Of course, Corey was there too. There were 2 other male employees, but the eyes of these senior colleagues were fixed squarely on Corey. While I politely nodded along with the conversation, I quietly sipped my drink. To my surprise, Corey texted me later that night. Hey, Annie, we didn't get to talk much today. Want to go for a drive sometime? I was taken aback. I had always assumed he had no interest in me. I was a little puzzled by the sudden invitation, but I was delighted that a popular guy like him was showing interest in me. Soon, Corey and I began seeing each other occasionally and eventually started dating. Word got around the office and we became the hot topic. Sylvia and Angelica in particular must have been stunned when they found out we were dating. Our interactions with them turned awkward, limited to polite greetings. Still, I was thrilled that Corey was my boyfriend. He treated me well, and being with him was pure joy. As we continued to date, something started to nag at me. Whenever we were out, Corey seemed to attract attention from women. As we walked down the street, I noticed a pair of young women staring at Corey next to me. After we passed, I overheard them. Wow, did you see that guy? He's so hot. I know, right? What a looker! They were glancing back at us. I glanced at Corey, but it was hard to tell if he was hearing the same thing or not. He was completely expressionless. Maybe for Corey, this kind of thing is just another day at the office. That could be why he doesn't even flinch when he hears voices like this. It's moments like these that make me fall for him all over again. But I couldn't just bask in the joy. It happened while we were sitting in the cafe. Sure enough, a group of women sitting at the next table were stealing glances at Corey. And as we got up to leave and passed by them to pay the bill, I heard the woman whispering among themselves, "He's good looking, but isn't she just average? Yeah, what a waste." Hearing this, a shock ran through me, but I acted like I hadn't heard a thing. Corey, as usual, was indifferent and settled the bill. I was hurt by those words, yet a part of me thought, maybe they're right. I had always felt insecure, fearing that I might not be good enough for someone as handsome as Corey. Driven by my insecurity, I opened up to him about it. "I do love you, Corey, but sometimes I worry. You're quite the catch, and I wonder if I'm enough for you." After hearing me say this, Corey looked surprised, but quickly responded with a warm smile. "You don't have to worry, Annie. I love you just the way you are." Those words brought tears to my eyes, and I decided to stop overthinking it. And so, our relationship thrived and led us to marriage. At our wedding, Corey was quite the hit with the ladies. My aunt in her 50s ran up to me, exclaiming, "Annie, you've scored a handsome hubby! Way to go!" My old friends also came up to me, whispering, "Your husband is so handsome. We're jealous." But I had no more worries. Corey had chosen to marry me after all. I was so happy. Among the wedding guests were Sylvia and Angelica, my senior colleagues. Both congratulated us, smiling warmly. Congrats! Wishing you all the happiness! I hugged them both, saying thank you. My older sister and her family also attended. My sister is 4 years older than me and has a 5-year-old daughter named Tiana. I had asked Tiana to be our flower girl. I've always adored Tiana, so having her as part of the ceremony was a joy. Sometime after the wedding, my sister asked if we could babysit Tiana for a bit. Corey had the day off, so I happily agreed. When my sister came to pick her up, Tiana was fussing, saying she didn't want to leave yet. My sister had to carry the crying Tiana away, thanking us before she left. It seemed Tiana wanted to stay longer, I said. Yeah, Corey agreed. You know, we talked about taking a spa getaway, just the two of us, right? How about we take Tiana along next time? Wait, to the spa? Yeah, she was our flower girl, so it'd be a nice thank you. What do you think? If you really want to. Sure. Really? Thank you, Corey. With that, we got the green light from my sister to take Tiana on an overnight spa trip. Corey drove, I was in the passenger seat, and Tiana sat in a child seat we borrowed from my sister. Tiana was all smiles, excited for the drive. We chatted and snacked as we made our way to the spa. After a while, Tiana started to talk. When I was in my mommy's tummy? What? I was shocked. I remembered my sister saying that Tiana might have womb memories. At bedtime, Tiana had mentioned some uncanny things my sister had told me. In my mommy's tummy, I was usually sleeping, but sometimes I'd wake up and float around. Wow, Tiana, that's amazing. You remember so much. Yeah, and I could also hear Mommy's voice. Really? Hearing this, even Corey, who was driving, couldn't hide his astonishment. Wow, can't believe this stuff actually happens. It's amazing, isn't it? Kids are something else. Soon after, Corey saw a convenience store on the side of the road. He parked the car and went inside to shop. Tiana and I decided to wait in the car. Eventually, Corey came back and we resumed our journey to the hot springs. As we were driving, Tiana suddenly said something surprising. Hey, big bro, how many times have you played princess in this car? Corey almost spat out his coffee. What? Corey looked perplexed as he repeated, Princess games? Yep, you've had a lot of princesses in here, haven't you? Caught off guard by Tiana's abrupt comment, Corey was left wide-eyed and speechless. Confused, I turned around to question Tiana. Tiana, what do you mean by princesses? I mean, you've played princess a lot in this car, haven't you? I was as baffled as Corey was. Seeing our confusion, Tiana teased. I won't tell. It's my secret now because I found out on my own. Tiana wouldn't elaborate any further, giggling to herself and whispering, It's a secret. Suddenly, she grew tired and fell asleep. The atmosphere in the car turned strangely awkward. Still puzzled by Tiana's words, Corey and I conversed. So, what was Tiana talking about? This princess thing? No idea, man. I know she likes princess characters and often plays pretend at home. Maybe she saw a princess in the car? Who knows? You know, it seems like Tiana might have some sort of prenatal memories and maybe even special intuition. Come to think of it, she did mention she found out something on her own. About 2 hours later, we finally arrived at the hot springs. Tiana woke up as we arrived and went with us to our hotel room. All three of us entered the room, and Tiana happily gazed out the window. I want to hit the hot springs right away. Is that cool? Well, sure, go ahead. Corey left the room alone to take a bath. I chatted with Tiana in the room, feeling relaxed. But then I remembered what happened in the car and I had to ask her again. Hey, Tiana, earlier in the car you asked Corey, how many times have you played princess in this car? What was that about? Uh-huh. I have no idea what you were talking about, and it's been bothering me. Well, then, I'll show you, Annie. Tiana opened her small bag that she always carries and began to lay out various items on the table. What are these? These are the things I found in Big Bro's car. They were cute, so I thought I'd keep them a secret and take them all. I looked at the items Tiana had laid out on the table, and I was stunned. Hairpins, hair clips, earrings, necklaces, lipstick, mascara, and even a hotel-provided hairbrush? None of it was mine, but they were clearly belongings of an adult woman. Where exactly in the car did you find these? Well, they were under the seat near my feet. A lot of them, actually. Wait, all of these were scattered around? Yes, it's like a princess playset, right? Rin has a lot of these at home, too. That's true. Listen, can I hold on to these? I want to ask Corey something. What? No way, I found them. I'll buy you another adorable princess set, okay? Really? Okay, fine then. With that, I put everything Tiana laid out on the table into my bag. I had thought Tiana had some special perception, talking about prenatal memories and such, but it seems that wasn't the case. However, my gut feeling wouldn't go away. Whose are these? Then Tiana and I went to take a hot spring bath. When we returned to the room, Corey was already there fiddling with his mobile phone. Upon our entry, he hurriedly stuffed his phone into his pocket, looking somewhat suspicious. Welcome back. Thanks. The hot springs were nice, right? Yeah, this place has amazing springs. Tiana got all warmed up too. Yes! After that, we enjoyed a luxurious dinner at the hotel. At night, Tiana, probably tired, fell asleep early. Corey was sprawled out, playing with his phone. Hey, Corey. Could you take a look at this? I placed all the items I had just received from Tiana on the table. Corey, rising from his seat to get a closer look, seemed to freeze, speechless. Looks like Tiana found all these things rolling around on the floor of the car. Corey, who had been slightly flushed from drinking, suddenly turned pale. She thought these were all princess playset stuff. Accessories, lipstick, mascara, brushes, and all. Is that what this is about? So whose necklace is this? I held up the necklace for Corey to see. He didn't answer. Next, I took the lipstick and examined it closely, and it had the name Sylvia engraved on it. Sylvia? At this, Corey averted his eyes. Corey, this can't be Sylvia from work, can it? Corey remained uncomfortably silent. Why would Sylvia's lipstick be in your car? Did you give her a ride? He nodded in silence. Why? Are you seeing Sylvia? He nodded again. Are you kidding? Was this before or after our marriage? Corey answered in a somber tone. Both before and after. What? I was so shocked my mouth stayed wide open. After digging for the truth, Corey finally admitted to having an affair with Sylvia. But the surprises didn't stop there. I began to worry about Angelica, who used to be close to Sylvia and also chased after Corey back in the day. Hey, you're not involved with Angelica too, right? Corey averted his eyes. You've got to be kidding me! Turns out Corey had been secretly seeing both Sylvia and Angelica while we were together. This continued even after we got married. Given that Corey, who works in sales, often worked late and went in on weekends, I now understood why he seemed so busy all the time. When I started dating you, Sylvia began sending me tons of emails every day. She wanted to meet, just the two of us. So I'd meet her occasionally. Then Angelica reached out, and I couldn't say no, and things just spiraled from there. I can't believe this. I felt so drained that I just sat down where I was standing. My handsome, kind husband had been involved with 3 women at the same time. As I probed further, it turns out Corey had dated multiple women since high school. At one point during college, he was seeing up to 5 women at the same time. I never wanted to ask Corey about his past relationships in detail. I thought nothing good would come of it. But to think he was this much of a womanizer. If you wanted to date multiple women, why the heck did you marry me? You could have stayed single and lived it up. I genuinely wanted to marry you, Annie. You're the steady type, someone I wanted as my wife. My parents were also pressuring me to get married and give them grandchildren. So you didn't think you should break up with the others? I really love you, Annie, but I also needed different types of relationships. What? Sylvia is like the dependable older sister, and Angelica is, well, harsh, but physically my type. They all serve different roles for me. It's been normal for me to rotate through multiple women. By now, I was beyond angry and just dumbfounded. My once dashing husband now just looked like a total sleaze. But I had no idea there was something left in the car like that. Me neither. If Tiana hadn't found it, I'd still be in the dark. I'm really sorry. Remember how I used to say I felt insecure because you're so popular? That I felt I wasn't good enough for you? Yeah. Well, that's changed. No matter how handsome or popular you are, you're just a low-life man. Corey looked down in defeat. If you want to sneak around, then go ahead and do it for the rest of your life. You'll find women who will flock to you just because you're good-looking. But I'm done. I want a divorce. Corey's shoulders slumped. It was now late into the night. Tiana was sound asleep. I was thankful to Tiana for finding all those lost items in the car. If not for this turn of events, I'd still be living in ignorance about the real Corey. What was supposed to be a happy hot spring trip had turned into the worst night of our lives. I was grateful to have caught on to Corey's infidelity sooner rather than later. The next day, the 3 of us went home and dropped off Tiana at my sister's place. Once the vacation ended, Corey and I headed back to work. His face was ashen. Everyone arrived for work and the morning meeting began. Today, I was the one leading it. Good morning, everyone. A quick announcement about some lost and found items. It turns out my husband's car was a treasure trove of lost items. Upon asking him, it seems they all belonged to Sylvia and Angelica. I said this while placing the lost items from the car onto my desk. Both Sylvia and Angelica looked shocked, and the other employees started murmuring. Corey just stood there with a blank expression. This lipstick has Sylvia's name on it, doesn't it? As I held out the lipstick, Sylvia rushed over with a flustered look to claim it. I'm not sure about the rest, so could you two sort it out? Sylvia and Angelica started dividing up the various items I had placed on my desk. Both were visibly sweating and flushed. Sylvia, Angelica, thank you for entertaining my husband so thoroughly before and after our marriage. I understand he's been a frequent guest at your homes. Sylvia and Angelica looked tense. The other employees and even the boss were stunned. Since I've found out that my husband has been seeing both of these ladies while married to me, I've decided to divorce him. Corey's face sank so low it almost disappeared. I'm stepping down as his wife, so feel free to fight over him as you please. That's all for me. Thanks for listening. This concludes our morning meeting. I sat down, and the room buzzed with whispers. Corey, Sylvia, and Angelica stood silent and defeated. Soon after, all three were called into a separate room by their bosses. Eventually, the trio could no longer stay at the company and left, effectively getting fired. After the divorce, I returned to my parents' house and planned to commute from there for a while. I consulted a lawyer and sought compensation from Corey, Sylvia, and Angelica in the divorce trial. Later, I learned that Sylvia and Angelica were fully aware of each other's affairs with Corey and had been competing by intentionally leaving their belongings in his car. Their little lost and found battle had been playing out without Corey and me ever knowing. Post-departure from the company, none became a couple, and they all dispersed. All three had a tough time finding new jobs, partly because they'd left the company in what was essentially a firing. Now, it seems, they're all scraping by, dipping into their savings and taking part-time jobs to keep up with their alimony payments from their divorce cases. On top of that, it appears the rumor has spread and they've lost the relationships they had built up over the years. As for me, being back home meant I saw more of my sister and Tiana. Tiana still adored playing princess, happily prancing in front of the mirror in dresses and tiaras. You really are a cute princess. Yeah, I hope I will marry a handsome prince someday. Yes, but remember, some princes might look good, but are actually really bad. Make sure he's also a prince at heart before you marry him. Got it? I hope my niece Tiana continues to grow and truly finds happiness. As for me, who ended up divorced in my 20s, I hope to use this bitter experience for a better future, hoping for a good relationship down the line.